Hey gang, and welcome back. Just a reminder, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com. You'll get 10% off orders over $10 and help with the channel at the same time. This week, I'm taking my Rakdos deck out for a spin and keep a hand with Mountain, Swamp, Felwar Stone, Smothering Abomination, Shinka the Bloodsoaked Keep, Runescarred Demon, and Sifter of Skulls. Liz is playing her Rashmi deck and keeps a hand with Tempest Caller, Kapala Warden of Waves, Yavimaya Coast, and 4 islands. John is playing his Firesong and Sunspeaker deck and keeps a hand with Charmbreaker Demons, Aurelius Fury, Wild Ricochet, Plains, Battlefield Forge, Starstorm, and Boros Signet. And last but not least, we have Steve, who's Eric's brother, who's joining us for his first game of Magic in probably several years. He's playing Eric's Kangee deck and keeps a hand with Raven Familiar, Felwar Stone, Stifle, Celestial Gatekeeper, Sawtooth Loon, Field Mist Border Post, and an island. John wins the die roll and starts us off. John plays a Battlefield Forge and passes. I play a Labraclaw Reach, which comes into play tapped, and I pass my turn. Liz plays an island and passes. Steve plays an island and taps it. He bounces it and plays the Field Mist Border Post and passes to John. John plays a mountain and casts Boros Signet. For my turn, Liz wants to show off her new nails, and I play Shinka the Bloodsoaked Keep before paying 2 to cast Felwar Stone. Liz plays a Yavimaya Coast and taps it, taking 1 to cast a Merfolk Mistbinder. Steve plays an island and pays 2 to also cast his own copy of Felwar Stone. John plays a Plains and pays 4 to cast Thran Dynamo. For my turn, I play Graven Cairns and I tap out to cast Sifter of Skulls. Liz plays an island for turn and casts Kapala, Warden of Waves. She then moves to combat and hits John for 2 with her Mistbinder. Steve is struggling for lands and casts Raven Familiar. He keeps 1 of the 3 and passes to John. John also has no land for turn, but he still has enough to cast a Fire Servant and passes. I play a mountain and I move to combat. I swing the Sifter at Liz, who takes the hit. In my second main phase, I bring out Rakdos, making sure my Felwar Stone can tap for the proper color. I haven't done enough to cast any creatures for free though, so I pass to Liz. Liz plays an island and she brings out Rashmi, taking 1 again from the Yavimaya Coast. She then swings Kapala and the Mistbinder at Steve for 5. Steve has his familiar die on his upkeep, not paying the echo cost. He brings out a Nimble Obstructionist to help stop any further attacks, and passes. John draws for turn, and passes. I play a Swamp, and I move to combat. I swing Rakdos at John, but before moving to blockers, John casts Starstorm where X is 3, but this gets doubled thanks to his Fire Servant. As a result, all creatures take 6 damage, and I don't even get an Eldrazi Scion because Rakdos goes to the command zone. In my second main phase, I cast Soul of New Phyrexia and pass to Liz. Liz plays an island for her turn, and passes. Steve still can't find a land, but he does cast Heuristic Study, and passes. John draws for turn, and passes. I draw for turn as well, and I play a Molten Slag Heap. I then hardcast a Runescarred Demon, and go to find a card from my library. Steve draws as I don't pay 1. Moving to combat, I swing my soul at John, and I pass to Liz. Liz plays her 5th island for the game and casts a Thought Vessel. She pays the 1 and passes to Steve. Steve draws for turn and casts a Pillar of Origin. John casts a Weathered Wayfarer and doesn't pay 1, letting Steve draw. With nothing else, he passes. For my turn, I move to combat and swing the Runescarred Demon at Steve and the soul at Liz. In my second main phase, I recast Rakdos and cast Conduit of Ruin, and Steve asks if I paid 1 for Rakdos, which I do. In response to the Conduit search trigger though, Liz bounces Rakdos back to my hand with an unsummon. I do get to go and grab Kozilek, the Great Distortion, and put it on top before passing. Liz casts Favorable Winds, paying 1, and then drops Lightning Greaves, also paying the 1 for it. Steve is still struggling to find some lands, and he drops a Warden of Evo's Isle to help alleviate some of the cost of his spells. He then plays an Azorius Chancery, bouncing back his own island, and has to discard at the end of his turn. John, with a glint in his eye, casts a Stare Command, choosing to destroy creatures that cost 4 or more, and destroying all enchantments. He then pays to find a land with the Wayfarer, and grabs Plateau, playing it. John then casts Land Tax, and passes turn. I draw Kozilek, which is just super now that I don't have a way to reduce him, and I cast Goblin Bombardment before bringing out Smothering Abomination to give the bombardment fuel for later. Liz plays a Flooded Grove and recasts Rashmi. She then puts the boots onto Rashmi and swings Rashmi at Steve for 2. Steve replays his island and casts Thran Dynamo. He then casts an Azorius Signet, and I wonder where all this ramp is coming from. Steve then casts Eye in the Skies, gaining a bird token, and populating it to make another bird token. John uses his land tax trigger on his upkeep and grabs some basics. He plays a mountain and then casts an Anarchist, returning a Stare command to his hand. John then discards a mountain and passes turn. On my upkeep, in response to the Smothering Abomination's Forced Sacrifice trigger, I sacrifice it to Goblin Bombardment to deal 1 to John and draw a card. I then play Cabal Coffers, and knowing John has the Austere command in his hand, I don't really want to bring out Rakdos. So I cast Oblivion Sower and target Steve, since he hasn't played very many lands, so he must have some on top. I hit 1 though, unfortunately, which isn't the worst, and I gain 1 life as it comes into play tapped. Liz casts an Eternal Witness in her main phase, and the Rashmi trigger reveals Muri's Guile. She gets to put it into play, and she returns Kapala to her hand and passes. Steve casts Ishai, Ojai Dragonspeaker in his first main phase, and then brings out a Sawtooth Loon, bouncing 1 of his tokens. Steve then draws 2 and puts 2 in the bottom of his library. Moving to combat, Steve swings 1 of his birds at me for 1. John uses his land tax trigger once more and finds only a Plains. He then plays it and brings up Firesong and Sunspeaker. He discards a card at the end of his turn and passes to me. I cast Soul Ring in my main phase, and Steve realizes his Ishai should have some counters on it. I swing the Sower at Liz, who blocks it with her Eternal Witness. I then sacrifice the Eldrazi to ping John for 1 and recast Rakdos. I then cast Duplicant, and Steve responds to the Duplicant trigger on entering by casting Squelch, which now that I'm reading the card wouldn't work, and John decides to cast Ward Leader's Helix, targeting Rakdos to deal 4 and gain 4. He then has the Firesong and Sunspeaker trigger deal another 3 to Rakdos, killing it, and John gains another 4 from the Firesong and Sunspeaker trigger. Liz uses her Guile trigger and rearranges the top 3 while Steve adds the counters he's missed. Liz then casts Kapala again, and her Rashmi trigger reveals a forest and she puts it into her hand. She plays the forest and passes turn. Steve casts a Thrumming Bird and then a Duskrider Peregrine. Moving to combat, he swings the Sawtooth at me, the bird token at John, and Ishai at Liz. John uses land tax once more and grabs 2 basics. He plays 1 of them and passes. I draw for turn and then pay 10 to cast Kozilek the Great Distortion. His on-cast trigger happens, and I get to draw 4 cards because of John's hand size. I then play Eye of Ugin and move to combat. John casts Path to Exile targeting Kozilek, but I discard a Vandal Blast to counter the spell. John then casts Wild Ricochet and copies the path, putting the copy's target on Kozilek as well, and he gets exiled. Liz uses her Guile trigger and rearranges her top 3. She plays an island and casts Protean Hulk, and reveals a Windstrider with the Rashmi trigger. She then puts the boots onto the Hulk and swings it at Steve. Steve takes the hit, and in her second main phase, Liz moves the boots back onto Rashmi. At the end of her turn though, Steve gets some revenge by exiling the Hulk with the Swords to Plowshares, and Liz gains 6 life. Steve taps out to cast Kangee and has it come into play with 4 Feather or Bird or I don't know what kind of counters, but counters. Moving to combat, he swings the Thrumming Bird and Ishai at me, and the Sawtooth and Peregrine at Liz. At this point, I'm wondering what kind of deal John and Steve have made, and it's only proven further when John flashes in Dictate of the Twin Gods. What was originally going to be 21 damage to me and 13 to Liz is now 42 and 26 respectively, which is enough to kill me and put Liz to 1. John finds more basics on his upkeep and plays a mountain in his main phase. John then casts Fiery Confluence, choosing to deal 2 to his opponents and destroy 2 artifacts. This kills Liz, and John blows up Steve's Strand Dynamo and Border Post. With nothing else, John passes. On Steve's upkeep, John casts Aurelia's Fury, where X is 6. He targets each of Steve's creatures, tapping them down and dealing 2 to each. This kills quite a few of them, and Steve can only cast Commander Isha and pass his turn. John draws for turn and drops a Plains. He then moves to combat and swings his Commander and the Anarchist at Steve. Steve blocks Firesong and Sunspeaker with Commander Isha and takes 4 from the Anarchist. John then casts Sunburn's Invocation and casts Austere Command, choosing the modes to destroy creatures 3 and less and 4 and up. This also triggers Sunburn's Invocation, and John keeps a Darksteel Plate, which he puts onto the field for free. Steve drops a Coveted Peacock in his main phase to act as a blocker, and passes. John untaps and casts an Inferno in his main phase to deal 12 to each player and each creature. Technically, John should have triggered the Sunbird's Invocation first, but we're a bit lax, and he flips the 6. John finds Price of Progress and casts it, which is more than enough to kill Steve. Game review time. So I'm sure some people are going to have a few issues with Steve's misplays, but frankly, he had a good time, he had a lot of fun, and he wants to play EDH, so that's really all I can ask for. It also didn't hurt that he had Stifle in his hand, which he could have used instead of Squelch for the same kind of play on my duplicant. EDH can be particularly overwhelming, especially when your past history with Magic tended to be 60 card decks with multiple copies of the same card. As for my own deck, Rakdos did okay, but I'm kind of getting sick of the deck that requires a commander that has such a restrictive casting cost. The problem I'm having with Rakdos is the fact that everyone knows what he does, and basically no one ever wants to let you do it, so, as a result, they always kill your early creatures that can deal damage, and you can never really get Rakdos out early on. I'm strongly considering turning it into either a Nala or a Malfegor deck, so we'll have to see what the future holds. I don't know what it is about Liz's Rashmi deck on camera, but she seems to always flood out, literally, with only islands. She never seems to have enough green, and she's often stuck with a handful of green cards. Maybe when she switches Rashmi for Kamena, the deck will do a little bit better. John's Firesong and Sunspeaker deck is a refreshing take on Boros, and I have to say, even though the fact that I don't like how they printed the card, I really love the design space of it. This is finally a Boros commander that doesn't want to stick to just combat steps, and I'm really happy to see it. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.